call the regular scheduled meeting of the Planning Commission October 9th, 2014 to order. Please note that Commissioner Fuentes is absent. And the first item on our agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Commissioner Brower. If you can please stand.
Ready to begin. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, that brings us to the public comment section. If anyone wants to address the commission tonight on an item that's not on the agenda, now is your chance. I don't think we have any speaker cards. So that leads us to the presentation item, consent calendar. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
All right, let's vote. Item passed unanimously. Of all the commissioners that are present. All right, that brings us to the public hearing. Agenda item number 2, use permit 8-14-4582.
Jennifer Mansour has a report this evening.
Thank you.
Good evening, Chairman and Commissioners. This item is a use permit for the operation of Majeska Playhouse, a theater, art school, and theater in an existing tenant space at the Spectrum Center Business Park. The interior of the tenant space will be modified to create a raised platform performance area or stage and a tiered seating area with 49 seats. The theater will be used for productions throughout the year. The productions are professional theater artists and students from the Theater Art School. Rehearsals and performances will occur in the evenings throughout the week from 7 o'clock p.m. up to midnight and on the weekends. The Theater Art School component of the business will provide theater art classes for students aged 9 to adults. The classes will be limited to 18 students per class with one instructor and an assistant. The school will provide one class from 4 to 6, Monday through Thursday, and 2 classes on Saturdays. The site is zoned business within the Pacific Commerce Center planned community, which requires a use permit for the proposed uses. Staff has analyzed the required parking for the 2 uses. The Theater Art School, which requires 1 parking stall for every 3 students, plus a stall for each employee, which would calculate to, for the pro school, 8 parking stalls. The tenant space within the business park is allotted 8 parking stalls. Therefore, the use of the building for the school is in compliance with the city's parking regulations. However, the theater component of this requires 1 parking stall for every 3 fixed seats, which would be a total of 16 parking stalls. The applicant is proposing to meet this parking requirement by sharing spaces with the adjacent tenants in the buildings addressed 21076 and 21084 Bake Parkway. These tenants are closed during the evening hours and weekends when the theater will operate. Accordingly, the applicant submitted a shared parking study as allowed by the code. The shared parking study for the theater has been reviewed by the traffic engineer and planning staff and found consistent with the requirements of the recently revised shared parking regulations. Staff is supportive of the conclusion of the study, which is that the theater can utilize the parking spaces allotted to the other tenants in the building when they are closed. The Spectrum Business Park contains a variety of professional offices, light industrial businesses, and limited service of retail uses. The proposed theater uses are conducted completely within the interior of the building. Given the park's light industrial nature, trucks will occasionally use the roll-up doors located at the rear of the buildings. However, the drive aisles providing access to the delivery trucks are located separate from the parking lot and away from the parking stalls used for the proposed business. The parking layout will allow us to avoid to have to cross paths with any large trucks, thereby minimizing any potential vehicular and parking conflicts in the business park. In addition, all parking stalls are located near the building, so students will be able to reach the entrance to the business in a safe manner. The theater rehearsals and performances occur when the surrounding businesses are closed, therefore they won't have any impacts on those businesses. We did receive a letter in opposition to your project, which is on the dais for your review on the yellow page. Generally, the adjacent tenant was concerned about the delivery truck traffic at the site, courier services such as UPS or FedEx that use the front parking area, and potential noise from the theater art school into his tenant space. Staff is recommending approval of this project and recommends the Planning Commission adopt the corresponding resolution for the site development permit. The applicant for the project is in the audience, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. So do we have any questions of the commission, of staff from the commission? All right, seeing none, I'll go ahead and open the public hearing. This is a public hearing. If you wish to speak on this, if you could please fill out a speaker request form. I've received one already. So one of the things I like to say is limited to 3 minutes for each speaker, and if you can, with the council or the commission, will address any questions that you have and address them at the end of all the public comments. So with that, I'd like to invite the first speaker up, Christopher Sullivan. If you can just state your name and city of residence for the record, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Good evening. How are you? My name is Christopher Sullivan. I live in Rancho Santa Margarita. My business is at 21084 Bake Parkway because I'm the artistic director of Majeska Playhouse. I'm just here if you guys have any questions. We're really excited to be in Lake Forest. We've been trying to get into the city for quite a while now, and this seems to like a really good fit for us. And that's all.
Great, thank you. All right, I guess we'll bring it back to the commission for questions, unless there's any other speaker. All right. Any additional questions? All right, let's go into commission comments. And I'll start first. Unfortunately, my iPad isn't, I can't seem to get any connection, so I can't cite the specific restrictions, but if I recall correctly, in the restrictions section, we've placed restrictions on the operating hours of the business, and I just want to make sure that the applicant is okay with that, and specifically not only the times but the days. I think I'm a little concerned about your ability to operate, and if you wanted to use another night, it doesn't seem like there's any conflicts with specific nights, if I'm not mistaken. And so it's my opinion to not necessarily restrict the applicant on any to any specific night of operation. So do you have anything to say about that? Any concerns?
No, not really. I mean, the way we operate is our productions happen Thursday through Sunday, and then we're typically rehearsing the next project or the next Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. All of it happens after hours. Our rehearsals start at 7. Our shows typically start at 8, except on Sundays I think we have a 5 o'clock matinee. So we're using the space, but the only time that we have audiences is during the weekend. And that's probably never going to change because we need to be able to rehearse the next show as well.
All right. Anyone else?
One of the things in the opposition letter that came up was the issue of soundproofing for the adjacent tenants. Have you thought anything about that, or is that a consideration that you've thought about dealing with?
To be honest with you, I don't think it's going to be particularly a concern. The way that our classes are handled is the classes are taught on the stage, which is in the very back of the warehouse. So it's not necessarily adjacent to any offices. It's adjacent to warehouse next door to us. Our instructors and staff are professional teaching artists and professional actors. And one of the things that we really push from the very beginning is focus. Focus in our actors and a preparedness of our actors. So it's not like we're running an after-school program or a daycare or anything. We're operating a very strict and very specific classroom. And so we don't think there's going to be a lot of noise. If there ends up being noise during those 2 hours of the day, then we can take that into consideration. But we don't believe that soundproofing is necessary. I've taught at South Coast Repertory Theater for the last 8 years. All of our classes are right next to each other. We share walls all the way down the hall. And because of our discipline and because of the way that we teach, it's not a loud and raucous type classroom.
So you don't have any sound amplification equipment or anything that
Nope.
potentially would be an issue for
We
the
will have speakers for music, but that is during performances, which is on the weekends, which there's nobody ever there. There is no amplification as far as microphones for the actors or kids during classes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
I'm concerned about the possible noise factors as well. So you're telling us that in the rehearsals,
Correct.
there's no microphones
Nope.
being used, no amplification,
Nope.
no accompanying music.
If there's an accompanying music, it's during performance, which again is during off-time hours for the rest of the center, where there is nobody else in the entire center on weekends.
On the weekends, but you have your school running from 4 to 6 p.m.
That is correct, and there's no amplification used during classroom time.
None.
None.
Okay.
We're 18 students with 2 instructors, so it's a 9-to-1 ratio. In a stage that's 28 wide, there's no reason to amplify anything.
Okay. I'm concerned about the potential for the traffic from 4 to 6.
Okay?
I think that's a legitimate concern. I had that in my notes before I read the letter that is objecting to your coming in, and I'm not objecting to your coming in. I'm just trying to bring a balance to this.
Okay.
I do have some concerns because I've driven through there. I think we probably all may have visited the site just to be sure that we had it visually
Good.
in play. But I've driven through that whole area at other times, and you can have conflict going on there. So your students would be inside between the hours of 4 and 6. Is that what we're understanding?
Correct. And we're not a lot of times dance studios and karate studios and such, the parents stay for the classes. So once they park, they stay. We're a pick up and drop off. So we will be using our 8 allotted parking spaces to pick up and drop off our students. We will have one of our staff members outside making sure that the parking stays in control and that the kids arrive into the building safely. And then we will have our other instructor inside making sure they stay quiet before class and making sure they're staying in control before class.
Okay, so you're going to have a staff member being...
A staff member will be outside making sure that everybody is safe and quiet, yes.
Okay, so typically people will drop their students off between
3:45 and 4?
3:45 and 4 and start arriving 5:50-ish to pick their students up.
5:55, 5:50-ish maybe. At that point, the majority of the center is closed anyway.
Exactly.
And it's, we are allotted 8 parking spaces, and that's what we plan on using.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other comments?
My only comment is that I really liked what I saw. I'm glad to see you guys doing this, and I'm grateful that you're bringing it to us.
Thank you. We're excited.
Same here. I think it's going to be a great addition to the community. I'm really excited if you've got my vote.
Thank you.
I have an additional comment.
Sure.
Maybe this was for staff more than you, but theater doors that remain closed during performances. What about during practices?
Yes.
Okay, and during school?
Yes.
All right.
We can't let the air out.
You don't want to warm you cool off the outside, you mean?
No, 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 no.
Huh? Okay, your bill might be too high. Okay, all right, thank you.
Yep.
All right, with that, I'll entertain a motion.
Before we entertain a motion, I think what we might want to do is look at having that doors remain closed during all activities, whether it's school activities or rehearsals, as well as performances, just to make sure that we have that all read correctly.
What page are
Condition
we on?
5.
Page 18, page 6 of whatever it is for this agenda item. Item number 5.
So you're saying to say during any theater performance and classroom instruction?
Whether it's school hours or rehearsals or performances, doors to remain closed during such time.
Sounds good.
Do you have sufficient air conditioning to operate under those circumstances?
Yeah, we've had a structural and mechanical engineer look at the space.
I have a question now. This may actually be a Mal question. A city attorney question. The current language, all doors shall remain closed during any theater performance. If we changed it to any performance-related activities, would that be sufficient? I mean, the word "any" is already in there. I mean, it seems like if we're trying to get too precise, we may be tying our own hands.
Yeah, I think we can go either with any theater rehearsal or performance or the language you suggested. They both get us to the same place, and it sounds like the applicant's willing to work with it anyway. So
It's a door.
yeah, so either way, we're going to be okay.
I just didn't want to be any more restrictive than we need to be.
No, 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 it's cool.
So maybe if we just put it any school activities, would that suffice? Something simple. I'm not trying to recreate it.
All right, is that a motion then?
Yeah,
You going to make a motion?
sure. I move that we close the public hearing and adopt the staff recommendations with the aforementioned change to limitation number 5, and got it out of order. But I think that's it. Lost my train of thought in the middle, sorry.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Let's vote. All right, item passes 4-0.
Thanks.
Congratulations,
Thank you.
and welcome to Lake Forest.
We'll see you at opening night.
All right, that takes us to item number 3, tentative parcel map 2014-128.
Carrie Ty has a staff report on this item this evening.
Thank you. Good evening, Chairman Hamilton and members of the Planning Commission. Before you tonight is a request to subdivide a 9.36-acre industrial property at 20 Con. That's located in the Foothill Ranch Plan community in the sort of northeastern section of the city. There's an existing building on the site, which was originally constructed in 1999, and there was an expansion approved in 2002, and that expansion has remained currently valid, although it has never been constructed. The site takes access generally from Glen Ranch Road, but you've got to go through either Ellipse or Definition, and Icon's the closest public street, and it's tucked away in the back. It's located next to the Southern Cal Edison's Viejo substation, right up against the toll road. So really the property is most visible from from southbound 241, because you actually can't see it when you're going northbound. The way the site takes access from Icon is it's through an easement. There's a 600-foot long driveway that goes between two other industrial properties that leads to the very back there. So the applicant acquired the property earlier this year and has been pursuing options that seek to maximize the marketability of the site. They currently, like I mentioned earlier, have an expansion that has been approved and it's still valid. So they have the option to expand the existing building. The existing building is 100,000 square feet, give or take, and the expansion is about 53,000, so it's a pretty substantial expansion. However, the applicant also wishes to look into the possibility of selling off an excess portion of the site, and thus tonight's request for a subdivision. The proposed subdivision would create two parcels. One would be a 5.36 acre parcel that would include the existing building as well as 213 parking spaces. And the second parcel would be 4 acres that's currently developed with surplus parking spaces but otherwise not developed with a building. And that 4-acre parcel is the very tip of that triangle-shaped lot that you see on your location map there. Now, just a little bit of kind of background on tentative maps. The subdivision map acts, they're sort of a two-step process when you subdivide a lot, and the first step is what we are going through tonight. It's called a tentative map, and there's sort of a second step, and it's called a final map. So just the approval of a tentative parcel map does not allow the applicant to sell off the second parcel immediately. Rather, the applicant needs to complete the parcel map process by going through, filing for a final map, and then they do all kinds of surveys and boundary checks and details I won't go into. And typically there's a 2-year process, or 2-year time period during which the applicant has to do that between the approval of a tentative map and the filing of a final map. Therefore, the applicant will, during that time, need to choose whether they want to pursue the subdivision or whether they want to expand the building, because they actually can't do both. So, however, if they choose to expand the building, the tentative parcel map could be allowed to expire after 2 years. If they choose to complete the subdivision process, the approved expansion would need to be revoked. So there is some kind of future decision that will need to be taken on this property. However, at this point, the request for the subdivision would allow the applicant a maximum flexibility, and in terms of whether to sell the site, lease the site, expand, etc. And it would also, conditions of, as we've written them, would prevent having the potential entitlement conflicts on record. So we're trying to compromise here. So that's just a brief summary of the project. This is a public hearing, and the public was notified of this item through the newspaper, through mailings to property owners within 300 feet, and also posting. And staff has not received any comments on this project. With that, staff is recommending that the Planning Commission adopt the attached resolution approving the requested tentative parcel map. This concludes our presentation at this time, and the audience, or the applicant, is in the audience for questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, any questions of staff from the Commission?
Yeah, I have one. Carrie, I'm probably just missing it, but I'm trying to find something in here that talks about the 600-foot long driveway to get to that back into that parcel, and where the maintenance of that responsibility for maintenance lies.
Because there is commonly shared area, the maintenance of the common area is done through a business association that's currently existing on the back here. So that driveway is maintained by, I mean, if you look at it, it would be the, I'm trying to describe it here. There's sort of 3 properties that come off of Icon, and that's all common property there, and there is an existing association.
Okay, so there's an association among all those property owners.
That's correct.
They have responsibility. Okay,
Yeah.
That answers my question. Thank you.
Any other questions of staff?
Yeah, I'm having a hard time finding it here. But on the map, the proposed map, there's a mention of a loading dock being removed because it looks like it's right up against the building. Are we, as drawn, are we putting essentially a zero lot line? Will the building be right on the line? Or, because it looks like the building, the building and the loading dock in theory are connected. So if we're removing the loading dock to accommodate the fact that it's in Parcel 2, I'm just trying to visualize can on this drawing.
So currently on the map, yeah, I do see the notation where it says the loading dock would be removed, and that's because currently the loading dock functions as part of the building. And yes, it would, where the proposed lot line is, that would put the loading dock on essentially the other property, which is not something that would be feasible. And so then in terms of your question, yes, that's essentially a zero lot line building, and the zoning for the industrial zone in Foothill Ranch allows for that.
Right, and I don't doubt that, but I was just trying to figure out the feasibility of,
Right.
If you're removing the loading dock, is the back of the building then just going to be closed off, or I'm trying to envision how in the future the two properties get used if somebody wants to access what I'm assuming are bay doors, and the loading dock has been removed in order to accommodate the lot line. How is there an easement in place, or is there enough space in place, or is it proposed that those bay doors will be gone? That's the only part I'm confused on. I'm just trying to figure out the logistics.
Right. So so two parts to your question. Number one is in terms of what the applicant's intentions are for the interior of the building. I'm going to defer that to them because as part of this application, they weren't proposing any physical changes to the inside of the building. However, the area that the loading dock is otherwise on remains open because it's, it's essentially necessary for driveway access, backing, and there's some utility easements on there as well. So it won't essentially, it'll be open, but legally, we didn't want to have a situation where the loading dock for a building was located on a separate parcel, right?
Thank you.
Any more questions?
What kind of parking complications does this second building create over there? It looks like right now most of the parking lot for that existing building sits out there in that little triangular piece out there that we're not going to split off.
Sure, I can go over the parking numbers. So the existing site is developed with 358 parking spaces, but the way parking is calculated, it's a combination in the existing building of office space and warehouse space. Total parking requirement for the existing building as it stands today is 178 spaces. With the proposed lot line, that would leave 213 parking spaces on the parcel that also has the building. So there's 133 parking spaces on the proposed Parcel 2 that essentially are surplus. And so we ran the parking numbers on the theoretical subdivision, if you will, and the remaining site with the building complies with today's parking requirements. And then in terms of Parcel 2, the applicant has done some studies to demonstrate that they can build a building there and also have enough space remaining around it to accommodate parking for that potential building as well.
So any range of building that they would choose to put up there, they would still have no matter what the usage would turn out to be.
They would have to, that's correct. And so essentially it's a balancing game. You've got to have enough parking to support the building, and so sometimes that limits the size of the building or the uses inside the building.
Yeah, because that was kind of my thought. Depending on the usage, that parking could be there, could not be there.
That's correct.
So I guess we'll wait till the applicant comes up and we'll ask them some questions about that. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. I'd like to open the public hearing. As part of the public hearing, the public has the ability to speak, something I'm struggling with. And if you can just come up and mention your name and your city of residence. I have a speaker card for Warren William. And there you are.
Here I am. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, fellow commissioners. Warren Williams with DRC Engineering. We're out of Anaheim, California. We're the applicant on behalf of the ownership CTI LLC. And I was going to mention, I thought we saved the boring one for last tonight, but maybe not, because there are some super valid questions here that we'll try to address. I want to be sure to thank staff, obviously. They've Carrie and her team have done a great job shepherding this through and advising us as we go forward with this potential subdivision. So we appreciate that. And staff's presentation, I don't have a lot to add to that other than I would like to address the questions. It was very complete and I think answered most of the things or mentioned most of the things that I'd like to or would have liked to have mentioned. If I could, quickly, the loading dock question. Well, let me back up just a little bit, and I think it was staff mentioned that we're trying to go forward with this to make the site a little more not only operational but desirable. So we're requesting the best of both worlds. Either we be able to go forward with the change plan that's already on file, if that's the proper move, based on interest, or have the option of subdividing the property off and building two buildings. We've put together a site plan that proves that it works, that parking would work, and it's truly an either-or situation. We're not trying to blend those by any means. If the desire is to expand the building with the change plan, the tentative parcel map and so forth will be allowed to expire, or, maybe even when we come back before your commission with whatever development plans we'd have, it would be asked to have that expired. Or if we go forward with the lot split, before anything could be built, a new site plan application would have to come in, and that site plan application would have to detail where the truck dock would go, where the new loading would probably go on the back of the building, the south side of the building, what a new footprint for the new building would look like, and all the parking and so forth. We have diligently shown that the utilities can be served. That was one of staff's concerns, and a very valid concern, that if we were to put the second building in with the parcel, that access on the driveway, utilities to the site would be provided, and we've shown that, in the back of that package with a colored exhibit and so forth. So it really is a either-or option, and I believe in either case, at least the new building case and maybe an addition via the change plan, and I'm not positive, I'd defer to staff, but I think either one of those would come back here, for you guys to look at. So this is simply, requesting the flexibility via this tentative map process to make the property a little more viable. And as far as, I think that, lends again back to the question of the parking, is we're not going to get to do anything unless we're back in front of the commission proving that parking on both lots are adequate before a plan comes together. What we're simply asking for via this tentative map is permission to have that option if the market presents itself. Ray Palverini with the ownership is here, and any other questions either one of us would be glad to answer.
Is the building currently leased?
No, I don't believe so, no.
Is there any provision that you might change that building significantly or do something with it in terms of its current size?
Ray can bump me on the shoulder if he wants to speak, but as far as the size, no, there wouldn't be. From what I understand as the engineer, they've already spent quite a bit of money on improvements both inside and outside to make it a little more presentable, a little more usable on inside. If the building were to be leased as it is, I believe there would probably be some maybe parking, dock spaces and so forth to the south that might be added to make it a little more viable, but that's going to be tenant driven or possibly tenant driven.
What size building would you propose to put on the second site if you were to develop the second parcel?
I believe the study, I did, it was 40,000? Okay, yeah, it's under the, it's certainly under the threshold of the change plan that allowed the addition. It's under that square footage.
Okay.
Not significantly, but comparable, but in that ballpark.
What type of tenants would you be looking for those two buildings?
I'm going to have to ask Ray if he doesn't mind to come up and answer that. Okay, thank you.
And if you don't mind, if you can state your name, city of residence, and also fill out a speaker request form just for the record. Thank you.
I will do so before I leave. My name is Ray Polverini. I'm a resident of the city of Costa Mesa. I work for CT Realty. We're officed in Aliso Viejo. The specific question, and appreciate all of Carrie's work and your consideration of our plan this evening. The specific question is the type of tenant we'll be seeking. The building lends itself well to a manufacturing operation. There has been that. There was that some time ago. There was quite a bit of office space in the building. So it would be a user that would need the amount of office that's there, which is approximately 25,000 square feet out of the total of approximately 100. And so it would be large. It would be manufacturing, it would be warehousing, and with office use. And we are talking with a tenant that would fit that bill now. And it's not a building that lends itself to what would be warehouse distribution of the sort that's rampant in the Inland Empire. The location doesn't lend itself to that, but it would be more toward the manufacturing with more limited truck traffic than you would see in a typical warehouse distribution.
That was one of my thoughts, is if you get a lot of truck traffic or other types of things, that kind of complicates the parking issue a little bit.
It would be limited really by the loading and the opportunity, and getting back to one of the questions, which was the loading that's there on the side. If that were the case, there would be more loading added in what is the area that would allow for the expansion. And so it would not interfere with the existing parking. It would have to mesh with it, but not take any spaces.
The 40,000 square foot building, that would also be manufacturing?
No, possibly. It's harder to say. We see that more as a potential. It could be all office, depending upon the demand, in which case it wouldn't be 40,000 feet because there wouldn't be adequate parking.
No,
Our intention is to park to code. So it would be, if it was warehouse, it could be that large, but it would be then limited warehouse, more manufacturing and assembly and office. But we don't see that as primarily manufacturing. But
40,000 square feet, it's probably going to be light manufacturing at that.
yeah, a little bit of it, and mostly warehouse, because again, we're going to be limited by the parking constraints. Our intention is to seek, to meet the code and not come back to you and say, oh, we're just 100 spaces short. That's not a recipe for success for us.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate your coming to see us tonight.
Thank you, Joe.
Yes, thank you. Any other questions? All right, we'll bring it back to... I liked your comment, but just 100 spaces short, so I just repeated a little element of that. All right. Questions of staff? Commission comments? Do I hear a motion?
Go ahead and step up and make a motion that we go ahead and adopt staff's recommendation on the tentative parcel map and close the public hearing.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Let's vote. Item passed 4-0. Congratulations. All right, that brings us to a discussion item tonight. Agenda item number 4, discussion on citywide wireless coverage.
Okay, I'd like to turn this over to Cheryl Kuta, who will lead the discussion on this item.
Thank you. Good evening, Chairman Hamilton, members of the Planning Commission. Carrie is going to start up a PowerPoint presentation for me. I will make this brief. You have several items on the dais in bright colors that relate to this item. The blue and the pink sheet are comments that we received from the carrier representatives since the staff report went out. We have not had time to analyze those, but that will definitely be taken as part of the input from tonight and worked into the recommendations as we move forward. The purple item is the PowerPoint presentation I'm about to give you, just so you can follow along if you'd like. So what I have here is just a brief PowerPoint that will walk you through with images of the facility types that are discussed in the staff report. So the staff report describes breaking out facilities into 5 classes. So what we currently have in the regulations is major and minor, so 2 broader categories. And this is an attempt to break those down into a finer mix of classes with different possibly design standards and definitely different levels of review. So class 1 is stealth facilities. We do have a lot of stealth facilities in town already. We see these very commonly, and a lot of times they are approved administratively. The examples I have here are the Sun and Sail Club chimney, the parapet expansion on Big O tires, and then some boxes that are just on the exterior of a building across the street. Want me to see if it stays on there if I change slides? There, it goes away. So we're good. So this slide just summarizes the definition of that type of facility, the fact that all antennas and equipment would have to be fully screened to meet this type, and that there are some general design standards that staff has recommended to date. Class 2, these are visible antennas. Now this is something that in our code right now, the picture on the far left with the antennas up above the roof of a building really would not be considered, but the antennas to the right on the water tank and on the Edison Tower are processed administratively or to the Planning Commission depending on separate factors. So here, this proposal is to make a separate class of visible antennas which encompasses all of these types, and these would be reviewed by the Planning Commission so that there could be a public hearing, so that the people affected by those visually would be notified. Class 3 are freestanding structures, and the one on the left is here in Lake Forest, just up the street on Commerce Center Drive. It's just a little building that's tucked behind a large industrial building, and you don't know it's there. Irvine Spectrum has something similar, but on a much larger scale, that's lit up at night. You know, you all know what I'm talking about. The middle is in Mission Viejo. It's a large clock tower at the YMCA. And then also under the freestanding structure category, we would have the standard monopole, which again, under our major and minor facilities definitions, the monopoles are not really favored in our current code. So this would open that up just a little bit, but also subject to Planning Commission review and public noticing. Class 4, right-of-way installation. Now, we have one set of right-of-way installations currently approved, and this is a picture of the one right across from Pittsford Park. The current code doesn't have a great definition or process for these, so staff is proposing to make them their own classification and give them a specific type of processing, and if they meet all of the standards that could be drafted and meet the city's, there's a licensing or leasing a standard that the council has already approved, then those could be done administratively by staff. And then class 5 is temporary facilities. These are, I've seen these in Newport Beach and some other cities when they're going to have a large event, like a large golf tournament or something, not necessarily something we would see here very frequently, but something that's not addressed in our code right now. So staff is recommending a definition and some processing procedures for this type of facility, because as you can see, they can take many different forms. Also mentioned in the staff report, design standards for each different type of class, but some as well for all facilities. So here, hard to read on the screen because it's so small, but generally the asterisk items are from our current code. So in general, you don't want any signs or advertising on these facilities. You need to meet the setbacks of the applicable zoning district, and we want now to incorporate the citywide design guidelines. That's a great tool for us for designing something that meets and blends in with its surroundings. Support equipment, such as the base cabinets, we want those screened from view. Our current code doesn't allow them to be required within a required parking or maneuvering area, so we'll leave some of those standards intact. And then we are proposing some different treatments for height. So in some cases, it's a little easier to go over the height of the zone as long as it's not a large, something that extends many feet above an existing structure. But we are keeping the current findings and the allowance to go over 35 feet or over the height of the zone with special findings. And so that's the slide. The findings for height, those are currently in the code, and we propose to keep those. We're also adding 2 specific findings that we're proposing, one that the wireless facility is visually compatible, and that it is going to function in compliance with all of the guidance from the FCC. That's something that they're required to do anyway. It's just one of those kind of belt and suspenders type things that we're proposing to put into these standards. And then finally, just to wrap up, we think that what we've proposed here allows some more flexibility than what we currently have, but it also defines the processes well, which is one of the things that the carriers were looking for, is some certainty and in the processing. We will work with the carriers through the drafting of the ordinances. The carrier representatives couldn't be here tonight, but as you've seen on the dais, they have sent us some comments, and they are very anxious to see what we draft up in terms of an ordinance, and I know we'll get a lot of feedback at that point. So with any comments you all have for me tonight, and with your direction, I'm happy to go back and begin to draft an ordinance and get that through the process and bring it forward for public hearing. If you identify some additional issues within this staff report or otherwise, let me know what those are. We'll do some further research and come back with a workshop number 4. Thank you.
Before we start, maybe I'd ask anyone if they want to comment on this. Seeing none, okay. Commissioner Ludden.
On the facility itself, and the reason I'm a little bit sensitive to this one is we're just starting construction on the Verizon side of Lake Forest 2. That starts on Tuesday. One of the issues we had talked about before is if they have emergency power of some sort, like a generator or something else on that particular site, what kind of provisions are we thinking about in terms of conditions that we might apply to generators, fuel tanks, things like that in effect could create, number one, they could become an aesthetic issue, number 2, it could a noise issue. Are we going to have certain standards that generators can't make over a certain amount of noise and that sort of thing? To me, I think we probably should have some provision in there to deal with the emergency power issue.
Right. Well, in general, the noise ordinance doesn't apply to emergency situations, so assuming generators do only run constantly during an emergency, that would be null. So if we want to place special restrictions on the noise during an emergency, that's something we could talk through.
No, I'm not so much worried about the emergency, but generators have to be exercised, and
right.
If they have a power failure, then they could run for several hours. Then if it's in a residential area, then it could become an issue, is my only concern. That technically is not an emergency, it's just a power failure.
Sure, okay.
And so that's saying, maybe we want to think a little bit about that in terms of, they can't put this, 90 dB generator out there and let it run for 4 hours in the middle of the night because you have a power failure, the neighbors fit.
Okay, we can look at that, and we can also look at alternatives in residential areas that they use backup batteries rather than gas generators or something.
Because their backup batteries, I think, are probably limited to, what, about 8 hours? I think something like that. So, I mean, it's just something like that. I think we just ought to, if we don't, bring up the issue in the beginning, it's hard to deal with it after they've built the site.
Okay.
All right, are we just going to, okay, I'll go next. So I think Verizon kind of stated one that I had at the bottom of the first page about the franchise. They have a statewide franchise. So I think if we call it something to the effect of a light pole attachment agreement or something like that, that would ensure that it's city-owned.
Yes.
So I think
That's what we've done in the case of the Crown Castle facilities, and we want to make that procedure our norm. And I will work closely with the city attorney to make sure that we are meeting the regulations and laws that they cite in this letter. But I'm confident we can do that.
Yeah. All right. So it looks like on page. Attachment 2, and I think it would be page 1. I just want to make sure that the class 4, you're just saying streetlight traffic signal installation, and if we have utility poles, I think would we want to add that to? I mean, that would be one that would fit in 4, right?
It would, and that's I'll kind of ask that question back to you. Do you want to include the standard brown telephone type poles, which we have relatively in the city because most of those things are going underground? I will tell you they're harder to integrate with the structure when they put them on an existing pole like that. Our thought with the street lights is it's seamless and it's very well integrated with the environment, and they can blend in with the environment much better than sticking something like that on an overhead pole. But if you would like us to work up some regulations for additional types of in the right of way, you can let me know.
I just think that I don't want to limit it to, if we're not addressing it, it just seems like it might be something that could limit cell phone reception. So that's just my one of 4 here tonight. Anyone want to comment on a few other, or at least one other?
While we're on that topic, if I could jump in just on that one, kind of referencing that discussion in light of the questions proposed by Verizon. It seems to me that what they're referring to as small cell installations is that. We're just not calling it that.
Okay.
And so, if I'm wrong, it may just be that I'm not on that same technical level, but it would appear that those little installations, like on the top of the light posts, are what they're looking for flexibility with on small cell. And it looks like we're giving it to them already in large part. I just would maybe think about, as you work with them, making sure that the terminology that they're used to is in the terminology we're using so that there's no confusion.
Because it sounds like, class 4 that we define here really is the small cell installation.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Maybe we just call it that.
They're saying, why don't you have something for small cells? I'm saying we do. They're just not recognizing our terminology. Maybe we work to put it in language that they're used to.
Well, there are some areas where you don't have very many street lights, and you may end up putting it on a utility pole because there's no other option. But, maybe we don't want to limit ourselves too much, but, once again, utility pole, you're right, it's going to be more difficult. It's going to be harder to make it look good.
Yeah, I think it's kind of hard to take a utility pole and make it look good.
I mean, on the other hand, if you can't provide service any other way, I don't know that we want to restrict that either.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're in a situation where we don't have a lot of the utility poles left anymore. I mean, we still do areas where edit overhead as opposed to going up, and they're not going to spend the money to go underground.
You got older city down there where I don't think they're ever going to underground it because there's no money for it.
Yeah, I would think that, you know, and I'm not saying we should categorically eliminate the use of those. I think we just need to use good discretion when the applications come in. If there's a light pole that's within a range of, that's where we want to try to direct the installation, I think, as opposed to just having it attached to a former tree trunk.
Well, maybe we could say it's preferred. Maybe use the term preferred, and that way, you know, if there's no other way, yeah, we'll look at it, but if there is one, that's the preferred method, and that's the one we'd expect them to use.
Yeah. I know in years past we've had applications where there wasn't anything, and we had them come back with all kinds of designs for everything from, you know, artificial trees on hubs.
Yeah, I don't want to see a palm tree on top of a utility pole.
Palm trees are kind of ugly. We never did get to see the eucalyptus tree, though. They never came back with that.
All right, I have one more. I've got all these devices. I've got to look at one and sync to the other. So I think on Class 3, freestanding facilities, freestanding structures, you should have a freestanding structure that was over 35 feet in the presentation. And I'm concerned that 35 feet, while on the face may appear reasonable, that's quite a bit. There are some that are quite a bit taller. So I'm not sure what the magic number is, but 35 just seems like it could be low.
I think you define it as the minimum height that they have to have in order to get proper propagation, and no more. And they can produce that in a propagation study, so, yeah.
So, if I may, in the case of going over 35 feet, Class 3 facilities are already subject to Planning Commission approval, as is any request for additional height. So there are two findings that are already in our code that are already made to facilitate these types of facilities. So we're not adding anything to the process, but we are still keeping the flexibility that they can go over 35 feet.
Okay.
With those findings.
And I think if you're out in places like, you know, Portola Hills and stuff like that, you might have an issue. You had to go over 35 feet in order to get to work, just because of all the hills and the valleys and stuff like that. So yeah, I don't think we want to hamstring them too much. On the other hand, they need to produce a propagation study that says that they have to justify the height.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
And if I may, one of the findings is that that additional height is necessary for proper functioning of the facility. That is one of the findings that would be needed for additional height. It's right. I don't have the entire finding listed here, but it's to the same effect.
And that's probably how you would get them to justify that, you know, produce a study, which they do all the time anyway.
I just wouldn't want to see another variance, you know, come before us for something. I think this addresses that. I'm referring that 15% landscape variance.
I had a question on Class 2 on the visible antennas, and that your example on the visible antennas back there again. Yeah, that one, the one on the left.
Yes.
You made a comment that might not necessarily apply. In this case, would we encourage them to do some type of a concealed installation rather than the visible vertical antenna? Or?
Yes. Right now, that type of a building mount could only be done if it was fully screened, where you couldn't see the antennas. You could see boxes above the roof or any other type of screening, but not like that. And that example is in Mission Viejo.
Right. So basically, the standing vertical probably is not likely to get approved without concealment in this city regardless.
Under the current code, that would be a major facility just because it's not concealed.
Yeah, and that's my concern too. I think in that type of situation, they should be able to conceal it and deal with it. I can't see too many places where that type of application we don't want to approve it.
The middle one
Yes.
is what that looks like first.
Yeah.
So the antennas like this are behind that screen at Big O Tires.
Right. And that one's basically, I never would have thought that was a cell site. If you hadn't pointed it out, I never would have figured it out. Because it just looks like it's part of the building, and that's the ideal solution.
It just looks like they need to move their sign up a little bit.
Yeah.
They just raised the outside.
Just raise the outside parapet, and that's it.
Yeah, exactly.
Another example is here, just a box on the outside of the existing parapet. Those just go on, they're mounted, flush mounted on the building and could be just painted to match, and then they would be visible antennas, or they're stealthed by putting them in a box.
Okay. Now, I was just trying to make sure I really understood that. So really the visible antennas really is pretty much a pole solution. There's not too many other things in that category. It's either utility, tower mounted or water tank mounted or something like that. And some of those have been actually concealed fairly well. I mean, sometimes they put stuff up there that those things are very hard to see. You have to hunt to find them. That's good. I think you're really on the right track. I think what you've done here really defines it well. I think it gives the utilities enough versatility that they should be able to operate within this guideline pretty well.
You're here. I think that was the cleaners. Does that mean we need to go?
Subtle hints.
We're being moved out. Yeah. I think this is great because it'll take the simple ones and it just for staff to take care of. Prior to this, everything had to come back before the commission. This should streamline the process for the applicants. It should speed along getting the service into the community, and the stuff that really needs to still come back before the planning commission is going to come back. So if we have opportunities to have a request for a variance, at least we get a chance to look at it.
Yeah, same here. I think this is going to be a great revision if passed. And I'm really looking forward to this getting over the goal line. I think I've said this is one of my favorite topics.
Well, this should certainly simplify your processes and procedures for, issuing permits for this. This ought to make it a lot easier.
Okay, quick question on attachment to Table 3, standards and procedures for right-of-way installations. We're talking here on those Class 4, essentially the small cell installations, and from what I remember of the workshop, plus it was reiterated in the letter from Verizon that was on the dais for us, the small cells are kind of intended to be the rapid response to identified needs in the community. And so I'm not sure, I guess I'm asking to be sure that we have, where it talks about standard licensing agreement, that's where we're having it put on community or city-owned structures. Do we have something in here that allows them to put their own structure because they're entitled to the right-of-way for the most part anyway, and so is there, do we have or might we need a second route? In other words, if they say, hey, we've got an identified need here, it's in the right-of-way, we're going to, and where we can have those same standards, that we can say, hey, you can build your own pole as long as it meets these requirements. It can still go through the staff approval process. It doesn't have to come to us because it allows for that rapid response. It's just a thought.
I'll let Mal, maybe a little more specifically the legal side, but staff's thought process on this was if you open up for them to put what we would now call a major facility in the right-of-way, it would end up looking like a monopole in pretty much every situation because there's limited space in the right-of-way. And so by calling a class 4 a small cell or a street light or a traffic signal, we tend to control a little bit more what it looks like, and we can control time, place, and manner as mentioned by the Verizon attorney. The license agreement gives us a little bit more ability to have it look how we want it to. So if you open it up too wide, we're going to lose our ability to control what it looks like, in my opinion.
This is a very good question, and it's a real hot button issue currently in the wireless community. The letter by Verizon states and in some ways overstates the current state of the law. Wireless companies have what are known as 7901 rights, and that is a statewide franchise right to the right-of-way. Those rights, however, are not blanket rights as they would want them to be. We have the right, the authority, as Cheryl has articulated, to regulate the time, the place, and the manner of their location. What the wireless companies are pushing for is a blanket right to the right-of-way without any regulation by the city, which would leave us up to their whims, which would be monopoles throughout the right-of-way. The approach that we have used in the past has been accepted by the wireless companies, which has allowed us to control the aesthetics and also the revenue that comes in from wireless providers. A typical monopole will result in rent that pushes $3,000+ a month that the wireless companies can generate or can provide to the owner of the pole. So to the extent that we can control the right-of-way and access to it, we control aesthetics, we control safety, we also control to a certain extent the revenue, which helps us with parks and other things in the city.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was good. All right. Any other comments?
Well, and I think, too, if you go back and read the Verizon a little bit further, they're encouraging the use of small cell sites, so I think I would turn that right back on them. So you want small cell sites, and that's what you get in the right-of-way. I mean, I'd turn that right back on them. I'd use their own document, because that's what they said.
No, I mean, I agree absolutely with all of that. I just was curious about the pros and cons of letting them build their own imitation streetlights versus using ours. But it was very well stated by the city attorney.
Yeah. You know, I don't expect this would turn into a hostile discussion anyway, because I think everybody wants what they have, and we just got to figure out how to get it there aesthetically. But it's the same case that the Homeowners Association. Federal law says you can't prevent them from putting up a satellite dish, but it sure says you can prevent them from putting it up in their front yard. Yeah, and we don't allow that. And people come and argue about that sometimes. We'll say, you need to go reread the law, because it says, yeah, you can put up your satellite dish, but we can tell you where you can't put it. And I think the rule applies here.
All right. I was just looking at the email from Core Alexander Liu, so I'm sure those comments will also be considered.
Oh, I did have one more comment on the temporary facilities. 180 days to me seems like a very long time for a temporary facility. I'm choking on that one. I would argue that they should come back in days and renew that if they want to keep a temporary facility. I think 180 days is too long.
I'm in agreement with that.
I mean, I've seen some really ugly temporary facilities out there. There's one on the 5 freeway about 4th Street, I think. That's the ugliest thing I've ever seen. It's held up with guy wires. It's crooked. Wires are dangling down all over the place. It looks terrible. I mean, it's just gross. I wouldn't want it in our city. And that's the type of thing I think there probably should be some regulation of that too, that they have they have to use, some type of good, manufacturing practice, what you call good installation practice on that. So number one, it has to be safe, and it can't, be totally aesthetically. And they should have to screen it or fence it or do something with it in order to, make it doesn't become a safety hazard. I certainly think that they need them, but I think probably we would want to have some type of, restrictions on what they can do with them.
I think if there's some kind of state of emergency, though, maybe staff discretion could, I'd be open to staff having the ability to issue them for a longer period of time if there is some kind of,
But that's my reason for renewing it every 90 days. They could keep it longer, but every 90 days they'd have to come back and renew that permit. They'd have to just they still have it there. I mean, they could have it up there for 365 days. I don't care, as long as they come back every 90 days and re-justify it. Otherwise, the tendency is to let it sit there and not, do a more permanent installation, and that's what we don't want to encourage. And if it's a dire emergency, they declare eminent domain. They do whatever they want anyway.
You mean we declare?
Yeah.
Okay.
The city would, they'll get eminent domain. They'll get eminent domain. The city will say whatever you have to do, and they'll do it. Because in a real dire emergency, all bets are off. You know that. The mayor can do anything he has to do. So I think these temporary facilities, for some reason, they got a major problem with the site and they can't fix it right away. I mean, what other reasons have they given to us for wanting a temporary site?
Well, the AT&T building on El Toro Road that's across from the fire station had a temporary facility. They had a facility on air. They did some major renovations to that building and incorporated the facilities into the facade. So they took their existing facility off air, put it on a temporary facility during those renovations.
And that's fine. I don't have a problem with doing any of that. I think, as long as they come back and they renew their permit every 90 days, so they don't. I know how construction people work. If they can dog it, they will.
And in the case, that one was a temporary to permanent type facility that was all rolled into one application. So it had parameters for that temporary facility, along with the approval of the permanent site. So
yeah, and if they have a permanent plan and it's well defined, then I'm not particularly itchy that we force the 90-day issue on them. But and I know things happen. I know down Laguna Beach that they had AT&T had a big problem with that facility. They lost all their air conditioning. They did all kinds of interesting things to get around that problem. And it looked like it was going to last a little while, which was kind of interesting. I mean, they brought in a temporary chiller that was huge.
Yeah, I think that having some checks and balances might not be a bad idea, because the AT&T site did have a problem. They got a little carried away with how important they thought they were for a while, until we had to go back and, I think, re-inform them that the application, the installation did not meet our guidelines, if I remember right. There was an issue that arose several years. I'm in year 10, so this probably maybe 7 or 8 years ago. I think we had a little situation with them. So just having and I get where Chairman Hamilton's going. In a state of an emergency, that's one case, but getting a temporary facility for other reasons than that, I think we need to have a few checks and balances. I would be inclined to agree that let's check this thing every 70, 90 days and make sure we're on the right track. But if we've got some kind of a disaster situation, once that's cleared up, those temporary facilities go away in their own time.
Well, the truth is nobody's going to want to pay for them, so they'll disappear pretty quick.
Yeah. So.
On the issue of the temporary facilities, referencing Mr. Liu's email, under the same section that, the Table 1, Class 5 and 10 is his proposed problem number 2. I just wanted to address it briefly on the record to say I don't see that as a potential problem, because if we're planning properly, if they're coming to us and saying we want to renovate or we want to build new, it should be part of that application to say that we're going to use a temporary facility while it's under, and so it's already addressed, and I just wanted to put that out there.
Well, I do agree with his comment about on temporary facilities. If it's an emergency situation, I don't think they should have to come to the Planning Commission to get that approved. I think staff should have the power to approve that without question.
Well, I think that's, in an emergency, the director's probably on the phone and saying, yeah, do what you need to do, so I would hope.
I don't think you have a requirement to have a detailed, plan on how they're going to set it up if it's a direct that needs to get it done.
Hear, hear. All right, anything more? With that, we'll close that agenda item, and that leads us to director's comments.
I have no comments this evening.
And the esteemed city attorney.
None tonight, Mr. Chairman.
And that leads us back to the commission.
I'll just very briefly say that I'm pleased with the way things went tonight, especially on our final exam. There's been tremendous progress made, and I think it's huge steps in the right direction, so staff.
I have no comment.
I have this Orange County Register article or editorial I'd like to read. No, I'm kidding. No, I want to echo Commissioner Brower's comments. I think staff all around tonight, every agenda item was well. You can see the time, and I think we got through things at a good speed, and it is a testament to staff's work on everything. So thank you.
Well, I would echo Commissioner Hamilton's comments about the staff's performance. I think what you've done on all three of these items tonight is really, really good. Especially the issue with the cellular service. I know that's a serious, complicated one, and I think you've really, gone the extra mile to try and make this for the vendors and for the citizens of the city. This will go a long way to really increasing the amount of cellular service that we have, and I think the vendors will probably respond to us well with this plan, and I think, where you're going with it, I totally, completely support it. And kudos for a really, really good job.
All right, and with that,